Thanks for joining us for our weekly discussion program. We call it Moral Side of the News, and we're glad you're alongside. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. And as always, I'm joined by a distinguished panel today. Reverend Harriett Akins-Banman, Centenary United Methodist Church, New Albany. Rabbi Emeritus Stan Miles, Temple Shalom. Father Bill Hammer, St. Margaret Mary and St. William Catholic Churches. Reverend Clay Calloway, West Louisville Ministers Coalition. Our first topic today is complex, and it sparked protests across the country, including this week at a Jefferson County Public Schools board meeting. The JCPS board says it's continuing on its course of what it calls racial equity in schools, but protesters worry that it was actually CRT, or critical race theory, being adopted in JCPS classrooms. Experts claim CRT, which examines how institutions may perpetuate systemic racism, is actually offered at the college level and not K through 12 schools. Superintendent Dr. Marty Polio said he was not surprised by Tuesday's outburst. He said, quote, "I'm not really going to back away from it. We do have a focus on racial equity. There's no doubt about it," he said. "It was a difficult evening, but in the end, we had to do the work we had to do, and that's what we did," end of quote. So we turn to our panel on Moral Side of the News, and we'd like to have you share your thoughts, please. Who'd like to start?
I had the occasion to speak very briefly with our colleague, Dr. Corey Schull, who was on the board. I think he was covered a bit from that meeting at the board meeting a day or two ago. It was a surprise, I guess, outburst, and I guess the meeting was hijacked by these persons who claimed that it was going to be, they theorized they were about to discuss critical race theory, which is preposterous. You were right, John. It is a theory that has been in public discourse, mainly in the legal field, college levels, for years. So they are opposing any consideration of equity that could arise from discussion or inclusion of this so-called critical race theory. It's true, it has not been taught in any public school setting from K through 12, but has been discussed in college levels for many, many years. So that's really the gist of what I think the protest was about. Of course, critical race theory is becoming popular, of course, with the discussion over the last year or so with racial equity and the issues with police equity and economic disparity. And that has been going on for years in this country. But most recently, the term has made its way into everyday discourse. So and then critical race theory, just in a word, is just a matter of challenging that so-called the white experience is not universal. And it also says that racism is baked in the cake of this country, which we know that to be true with our Constitution. We know, of course, that critical race theory says that you cannot fix if you don't face the reality of that. So that's really what it's about in a word. And it's basically saying that America, sad to say, even though it's progressive in a lot of respects, is very regressive in terms of the world discussion on race, because rather than the United States being a country of the eagle, it's more or less like an ostrich with his head buried in the sand with the biggest part exposed. So that is why it continues to rear its head in a very sad way in America, because unlike countries like South Africa, England, and around the globe, they have faced it in a very courageous way, in a way that America has never had.
As I read the story that you sent us, John, two thoughts came to mind. One is the misunderstanding of this phrase, critical race theory. It seems to be thrown around without any real understanding, and that was evident in the news article. And then beyond that and under that is the fear that is causing us to be so divided and so reactive. And so how do we as a culture get underneath that fear and help our communities name that fear of one another or of things shifting and changing. That seems to be a part, at least for me, part of the bigger moral question as we wrestle with making equality really the gift to all people.
I agree with both you, Harriet, and you, Clay. I think your points are so correct. When I think about the topic that we're discussing right now, my thoughts go back to Charles Dickens and the beginning of his novel, A Tale of Two Cities. These are the best of times. These are the best of times because finally, in a sense, we're beginning to face these issues. We have a day on our calendar now that is a national, I don't want to say holiday, because I think holiday almost trivializes it. A national day of concern when we face frontally our past. We have that, the best of times. But we also have the worst of times, because I see this discussion not just about critical race theory, but about what we can teach about our history. You know, it's the history has warts. And if we don't teach the warts, we're only teaching half the story. It is so ironic. On one hand, Juneteenth, on the other hand, this move to not teach about these issues. And with what happened at the school board the other night, you know, I'm tired of folks coming in and just insinuating themselves with loud voices and stridency, rather than trying to get together and, in the words of Isaiah, come, let us reason together. We got a lot of heat out there. It's summertime. We need the light too.
We've all been experiencing, I think in our own congregations, I suspect, and we certainly see it daily, the breakdown in civil discourse. It is possible to discuss and disagree, to do it in a respectful and civil way. Just for instance, even as we were talking here in some of the articles, there is no common definition of what critical race theory is. And Clay did a very good job explaining the context in which it has been used in, particularly in many years now. And I said it's been taught at the college level, or being used at the college level to teach. But you put about 10 of those people in that room that were there, and they will each have a different definition of what we're talking about. And I think to try to engage in civil discourse is what we're losing, and sometimes even happening in our own families and our congregations, and certainly in society as a whole. And that's the sad thing for me right now, and part of the worst of time. But also, I think that there's a lot of people who also do not even want to agree with the facts. And that's part of what I think Jefferson County Public School System was trying to address at that meeting, was the facts. That there is a disparity, clearly, in progress, in measuring progress in the school system, and you measure that by intellectual learning, opportunities available to, and there is a wide disparity there. I can speak, now I do not know what's being taught today in, say, a class like world history. What I can say is that when I was taught world history, it was totally European and a little bit of Asian, insofar as eventually would set up why there was, the World War II. But only part of Africa that I can ever remember studying in world history was Egypt. And that was perspective, again, of the Egyptian culture, Pharaoh, and all that. And more often, it was because of the battles with the Greeks and the Romans. So again, it was still a European kind of perspective there. And so I know nothing about the formation of Africa from my formation in my grade school, even high school years, other than it was colonized. We don't want to admit that today. It was colonized, and people were, in a sense, enslaved even on those concepts. There's a lot of our history that we just choose to gloss over. And then that has a ripple effect, I think, across the board. So to be able to talk about that and admit that, and so that's where I would say to some of the people who were at the board meeting protesting, something that wasn't even on the board, on the agenda, or even being proposed, but to say, how do you want to address these issues of clear, measurable disparity that's going on in our education system and our society?
Well, to piggyback on what Stan said, and also you, Father Hammer, there is this paradox of best of times and worst of times, in that people are really voicing concern, right? And they're going to whom they think are the authorities that can do something, like the school board. There is this voice that is rising, and not only among the adults, but what I'm encouraged by are the voices of the young people I hear saying, we want to know the rest of the story. As white students, we don't know the whole story, and we have to know the whole story to be good citizens. And that's the good news for me. And all of this chaos and mess is that perhaps minds are being opened to explore.
It's rooted in ignorance, not only because they don't know, because they are innocent of what they don't know. Mm-hmm. But part of it is because they refuse to hear anything different than what they've come to understand. That's the ignorant part about it, the sad part about it. Anything that's going to, they really don't want equity. They really don't want, they say equality only when equality allows things to stay the same. So, and so anything that's going to challenge the status quo. Now, the school board has been practicing an equity plan for years in terms of their educational elements, their student assignments. I mean, it's baked into the cake of the plan of the school board today, and it's been that way for years, and they're still operating based on that. But these persons that are coming in to protest because of this new term that's out there, I mean, just like the notions you hear on these popular news channels like socialism and so forth, they don't have a clue as to what socialism means, what the origin is. I mean, they just hear these buzzwords and they run with it. And they hear that critical race theory is bad because someone's quote said it's bad, so therefore they're going to assume that it's bad in all things in all ways. But really, they need to be educated, and this country needs to be educated. And needs to we need to start at the elementary and preschool levels. That's the only way this country will ever get to any semblance of justice, the way it has in other countries around the globe, like South Africa's of the world. They've had race and reconciliation panels there, in England and other countries. Canada have all faced their histories, and they still have work to do. But America is sorely missing and lagging, based on the catastrophic ignorance of just the most basic elements that affect our society. We talk about Juneteenth. Really, stands actually June 19th is where the term 19th came from. But most of us don't realize the significance of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, what that means to this country's history, and how it affects all of us, not just former descendants of slaves, but it affects all citizens. So there's a need to educate. There's a need to really get at the root, to radically transform and make the best of what we've gone through the last year or two with the racial animus and the police disparity that has just swept this country, swept the world. So like you said, Stan, it's the best of times and the worst of times. And I think that Louisville is a microcosm of the rest of the world, is in that sense. I've always said Louisville is one of the most progressive cities in the country, and the most regressive cities in the country at the same time. The same city that produced Muhammad Ali also produced Mitch McConnell. They're the exact same age. They both went through public schools, but you see, you got radically different results. So Louisville has always been at the forefront and always at the back at the same time. So I think this moment in time is an example of how they can use this moment to really move the school and the city as a whole forward. We're going to get to a point later about Louisville being the kindest city. I agree. But I think it's a golden opportunity to really make a difference. And the school system is almost always the place where it begins and ends, sad to say.
Very good. We're off to a good start on our program, Moral Side of the News. And for our second topic this week, Louisville Metro Police found a man shot to death off River Road. It was the city's 100th homicide in 2021. Last year, Louisville recorded its 100th homicide in August, then ended the year with a record 173 murders. So, panel, we turn to you, and can anything be done to curb this deadly trend?
One thing that happened this week, and it was crystal clear to me when we had the shooting at the J. Alexander restaurant near Oxmoor Mall. I mean, that was all over the place, over and over and over again, all day. Thank God, no one was killed in that shooting. But because it happened in the east end of Louisville, it was really news. And there are so many tragedies that happen in other parts of Louisville, the west end, the south end, and so on. Our homicides, they didn't get the play that this event, this tragic event, did in the east end. And it just befuddles me.
Well, it should not be a surprise, Stan, because if we have guns everywhere, then shootings can happen anywhere. And this is America. So guns and violence is as American as cherry pie, as H. Rap Brown famously said. I organized a group about in 2002 or three or four called No Murders Metro. And we launched that campaign, believe it or not, on Shelbyville Road. It was a murder that occurred at I believe it was a Wendy's right there on Shelbyville Road across from the Oxmoor Mall. That's where we started the campaign. And from there, we went across the width and breadth of the entire city. Wherever there was a murder site, we would visit that with a group that were vigilant to have prayer and to restore peace and harmony to the community. So we launched that campaign on the east end, on Shelby Road, and went all over the city, south end, north end, west end, said that it occurs disproportionately in poor neighborhoods because of sociological factors. But murder can occur anywhere because there are guns everywhere. So we should not be surprised at all about it happening there the way it did at that restaurant on Shelby Road.
One of my kind of gut reactions is that this is not my goal, and I don't think it's a goal of anybody here, but I do think it's a goal of a lot of our people in our nation to proliferate guns. It's their goal to make sure that literally everybody's got multiple guns always on them so that you're ready just in case. And so then you get any light threat or something like that. And then you have to get into proving yourself. And then that's when the guns start flying. But that's the goal of a group of people in our nation. Proliferate guns, and in a sense, by doing that, proliferating the violence that naturally follows from that. You know, if you're going to swing at somebody with your fist, you're less likely to kill them with one action as opposed to pulling a pistol and pulling the trigger. Doesn't mean you can't kill them with your hands. Of course you can. You can kill them with a knife. You can kill them with your car. I mean, there's all ways if you're hell bent on killing somebody to do it. But that's what I'm finding myself more and more frustrated about, is that I think it's the goal of some people in our country. And how do you dialogue? How do you talk about it? No, the way to try to change it is going to work with our young people. And there are a lot of groups out there who are working with that, trying to show them there's a way to respond without violence. But that's a long road yet ahead of us.
I don't know that I totally agree. I think that there are two groups. I think that there is the group that wants owning a gun to be legalized and for there to be steps that are appropriate for those who are responsible gun owners. And then I think that there are illegal guns that are passed around. I saw a story not long ago on a PBS channel that followed an illegal gun as they finally caught up with it and saw how many different people it went through and the damage that it did. So I think that there is that, push and pull that guns are available to us. And unfortunately, in dire situations, they are used horribly and cause such pain. What upsets me about this 100th homicide is that as we look back at the stories at how many of the age of those who are being killed by guns in Louisville, that is depressing. And as a mother, that just really sends me over the edge to see these young lives taken by such gun violence.
I want to thank you for helping to clarify that. I wasn't trying to suggest that there's only like two groups out there, those who are opposed to violence and those who support it. I'm just saying that there is a group among many groups. Mm-hmm. There are very much people who take gun safety very, very clearly. People get their guns truly for just hunting purposes. That's the reason they have them. I do not have any problems with gun ownership. I don't have any problems with people, again, defending themselves. I don't have a problem with that at all. My problem is with the ones who are promoting the kind of violence that, in fact, is being reaped right now. The ones who say everybody should have lots of guns.
So Bill, you're really saying you have a problem with the gun evangelists, those that are promoting it in an aggressive, deliberate, proliferating way. And you have to go back to our legislators in Kentucky. I don't know what happened in Indiana, but they're actually making it easier to obtain guns. They're deregulating guns. You don't need a gun permit to carry a gun in public. You don't need a gun permit to own a gun. I see people carrying guns in public out in the open. That makes me feel uncomfortable. But it's legal. Ladies, men, everybody's like the wild, wild west. You couldn't even carry a gun in Dodge City. Tombstone, at least Wyatt Earp, maybe you check the gun out at the sheriff's station, but now you can just carry them willy-nilly everywhere. So our legislators have really lowered the bar in terms of the ability to not only own guns, but to carry guns in public. So they are part of the problem. Either you're part of the solution or you're part of the problem. And they're part of the problem because guns literally can be everywhere at any time on just about every occasion. You have a few exceptions. You can't carry them on a plane. You can't carry them in the courthouse. It's very, but they're in the process now of reducing where guns can be restricted in terms of used and carried, but making it easier and easier to carry them willy-nilly. So to see violence, the real miracle is that we don't have even more shootings than we see, because if guns are everywhere, then a shooting can occur just about anywhere. And that's a sad reality.
I don't know about you all, but whenever I go into a public place, definitely when I go into a restaurant, or even when I go into a doctor's office or a store, one of the first things I do, and it upsets me to do it, I look for an exit strategy. If something untoward happens, what is the easiest and most expeditious way for me and those who I am with to get out of harm's way?
Well, it appears that the current administration, Biden administration, is daring to face the gun proliferation issue. So unlike many who are in certain political camps who want to lower the bar, he's trying to add restriction and enforce the Second Amendment, where it's a well-regulated. They want a no-regulated militia. So that there needs to be some regulation, as we see in so many areas of our lives. Without any regulation, then you have a degradation and eventually a destruction of human life. So we have to have some level of controls. And so I think this is what you get. This is our society. And the fact that it happens in one part of the community in a way that may not happen with the same frequency as others. But the miracle for me is that it doesn't happen more often than not. We had some very sad shootings in the eastern part of the county. Remember the shooting out at Kroger's where the Bush guy came and shot the man and woman that was the East End. That same parking lot 2 years before, a man shot somebody. So, I mean, so to say that it's in a certain part of town, but that doesn't mean anything. The whole world is a ghetto now, if you want to use that term, because you see the same kind of activity happening everywhere because there are guns literally everywhere. That violence could erupt at any time and you can't control it. That's why, Stan, I agree with you. We have to be mindful of an exit strategy because it can happen literally at any time, at any place.
All right, panel, let's finish on some good news on this episode of Moral Side of the News. We've got about 2.5 minutes left. Kentucky has been crowned the kindest state in the U.S. in a new study commissioned by Verizon as part of its campaign for a call for kindness. Indiana ranked 29th. Dr. Oliver Scott Curry, research director for kindest.org, said, overall, our research revealed a surprisingly high capacity for kindness across America. So, panel, this is some good news to end our program. We've got about 2 minutes.
They recognize it. A lot of out-of-state visitors coming in. And again, we've had the national campaigns practice random acts of kindness. So I'm glad Kentuckians are doing that the best.
With all due respect, with the conversation that we've had up to this point in time, this thing, my reaction is, you got to be kidding. It's like what you said at the outset, Clay, progressive and regressive. I think it's something to which we can aspire, and hopefully we will. But are we there yet? I disagree with Verizon. I don't think we're there yet.
Well, it could be a part of culture. You know, Southern culture, believe in the South is probably one of the most violent regions in our nation. But they do have a kind of polite culture of the South that's been here for generations. I was a guy named Bob. He was a national public radio announcer. He's from Louisville. But he talked about Louisville being so distinctive in terms of courtesy. Maybe imagine how many places you go into Louisville where you go into not a restaurant, but a filling station where the person says, oh, thank you, honey. Thank you, baby. They'll hun you. He said, if you go to Louisville, they will hun you to death, like honey you to death.
Harriet, I'll let you have quickly the last word on this topic.
Polite is not always kind.
Right. That's true.
Well, thanks to our panel, Reverend Harriett Akins-Banman, Rabbi Emeritus Stan Miles, Father Bill Hammer, and Reverend Clay Calloway. Thanks for watching and listening to this edition of Moral Side of the News. We'll be back again next week. Thanks, and so long.